It being an election year, we wanted to look at New Zealand's controversial MPs, but not controversial in this year's election because that's not really fair, and not counting this guy because his government's still technically in power. We're not counting Australians who might be Kiwis because that's also not fair, and we're not counting controversial overseas.
I can smell the uranium on it as you lean towards it.
Seem right either. Or this guy who was actually a Kiwi. Arthur Winton Brown was Mayor of Wellington in 1892 when he up and vanished. He told people he was going to check out a mine that he had in Mokau, but it turned out that the mine was losing a ton of money. He laid the blocks for the first library in Wellington, boarded a boat, sailed for Australia, then England, then ended up in New Orleans. William Malonic, very Scottish sounding name, was actually an Australian. He built Malonic Castle in Dunedin. You might know it. It's a beautiful place sitting up there on top of the hills. Came over here to run the Bank of Otago, did a really poor job, and then found out that his third wife and his oldest son Dougie were having an affair. Worked on the Colonial Bank of New Zealand before that crashed. Ended up committing suicide in Parliament House in 1898. John Banks is our number 3. Now, John Banks was Mayor of Auckland twice, and he was a parliamentarian for quite a long time as well through the 80s. Got in trouble in 2011 for the teapot tapes here with Prime Minister John Key. Got in trouble for filing incorrect tax returns over his election. Got a $750 fine for using his phone on a commercial airplane. He was vehemently homophobic and once compared homosexual sex to passing barbed wire up your ass. The bill still managed to pass, and most recently in trouble for having an illegitimate child and fighting the court case. Winston Peters. Now, there's a lot that could be said here. This is a man that got censured for giving false information as to the amount of money coming into his party when he set up New Zealand First. Hundreds of thousands of dollars for it. He's held the country to ransom when he spent weeks and weeks negotiating with National and then with Labour. He's kept hold of his ministerial car after he was fired. One of the 3 times he was fired from a ministerial portfolio. He's said that Asians are importing criminal activity. He has problems with Hindus and Sikhs in the way that they carry around cultural items. He had issues with Te Ururoa Flavel for using Māori in the Parliament, for which he can actually do that. And most recently, he's been in trouble for being overpaid on super, which he paid back, but still seems kind of dodgy. Most Kiwis know Sir Robert Muldoon from this.
So we got a date, Prime Minister?
We got a date, the 14th of July, which we've worked out at Government House as being the appropriate date.
That doesn't give you much time to run up to an election, Prime Minister.
Doesn't give my opponents much time to run up to an election, does it?
People who worked with Muldoon said he was a bit of a bully, and that was a bit of an understatement. He created the Dancing Cossack ads that vilified Labour throughout the 70s and 80s. He tried to cancel Labour's super scheme illegally without having a replacement in place. He ramped up the Dawn raids, which unfairly targeted Pacific Islanders and damaged relations between the islands, the unions and police. He drove MP Colin Moyle to resign after raising suspicion of homosexual activities in 1977. He put forward sitting MP and former Prime Minister Keith Holyoake as an impartial Governor-General. He hurt the boat and caravan industry with a 20% levy on everything that they produced. He refused to block the Springbok tour of 1981, which led to nationwide riots. He failed in his think big policy, which was basically borrow a lot of money, create a lot of work. Didn't create a lot of work, but made a lot of debt. He froze the New Zealand dollar for 2 years and tried to freeze the entire economy the same way. He was pro-nuclear and refused to budge on that one. But worst of all, he was responsible for the death of MP Keith Allen from Tauranga, who with diabetes wanted to step back, got told no, went home and literally drank himself to death.